But Dan and Frank were having lunch one day, and something along the lines, Frank said, "Hey, when are we going to do something to get our former football players into IT, right? If they're not going to make it pro, we got to have some kind of option for our players." And Dan called me up. I was working in healthcare out of Denver at the time, and he said, "Hey, I need you to come down here to Phoenix and help put a program together where we can turn football players into coders." Right. And that's how we got started. Right. That's how we got the name Tekletics. Right. Is our first partnership was with Arizona State's athletic department. And it wasn't just football players, it was soccer players and wrestlers and volleyball players, and you name it, right? Anything we could bring in.
Welcome to Ansible Edge, the podcast highlighting visionary leaders driving small tech-focused businesses. We showcase agile innovators converting bold ideas into sustainable growth and operational excellence. Each episode offers actionable insights, inspiring stories, and practical guidance. Join us in exploring the future, learning from successes and challenges, and understanding technology's transformative potential with empathy and curiosity. Welcome to today's episode of Ansible Edge. We're honored to have Casey Fox, co-founder of Tekletics, joining us. Casey brings more than 20 years of experience in data engineering, app optimization, and workforce development. He built his career through a non-traditional path, grounded in hands-on learning and a relentless work ethic. And when he co-founded Tekletics, it was with a bold mission: to transform former athletes, veterans, and professionals from all walks of life into high-performing technologists. It all started with a partnership at Arizona State University's athletic department, and it's only grown from there. In this episode, Casey shares the story behind Tekletics, how their model delivers US-based tech talent at globally competitive rates, and why bridging legacy systems with cutting-edge AI is a growing opportunity. We also explore today's workforce trends, how Tekletics is staying ahead of the curve, and what it takes to build agile, resilient teams in an AI-powered future. Stick around. This is a conversation about innovation, transformation, and what happens when you bet on people. Casey, thanks a lot for joining us today. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling in from South Carolina. I'm just outside of Charleston, South Carolina, and it's a beautiful day out here. I'm in my work cave here at the moment, but I can see outside my window. I see everybody outside having fun, so it looks nice.
Nice. That's good. I imagine that's like a blessing and a curse to see people having fun while you're working.
Yeah, it's great, right? When you look outside, it's 110 degrees, and it doesn't look like people are outside doing yard work and stuff like that. Then I'm happy to be sitting here. When everybody's outside having fun, I'm like, kind of wish I was out there enjoying the party with everybody else. It can go both ways.
Casey, through doing research for the podcast and just looking at Tekletics itself, it seems like you took a really non-traditional, non-linear approach to getting into the tech industry. And I really love that because, that does seem to be Tekletics' secret sauce. And I love seeing leaders that kind of walk the walk and talk the talk. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I've always kind of thought of myself as being the kind that I want to walk the walk. I'm not necessarily the great one at talking it, right? But I can sit there and most things I can get down to business and get my hands dirty and do some coding with everybody. But I wasn't. No, I mean I was a business major out of school. I was a business admin major. There was a fair, I had an option with computer information systems, so there was a component to that. But yeah, I mean, did I expect that my career would be data engineer and doing some data optimization and app optimization, things like that? Probably not. So I came in. I really got into a boot camp. I had somebody that called me up once upon a time and said, "Hey, I've got this boot camp in the Midwest. Would you want to come out there and join it?" And it was on business intelligence. And I look back and I'm like, I didn't even know what business intelligence was, but I was working as a bouncer somewhere and trying to get by. And I was like, yeah, sure. Instead of trying to break up fights at 2 o'clock in the morning, you want me to come learn business intelligence? I'm in, right? And I did that, and a lot of it clicked with me, and I loved it, right? And I got into it, and I put in a ton of work to get into it, and I've been doing it about 20 years at this point. But when we started Techletics, that was one of the early ideas is, hey, how can we get people that aren't from traditional tech background? Because I've worked with a lot of them. Right at this point in my career, I've worked with I would say some of the best developers I've ever worked with were liberal arts majors. Right, they weren't coders. They didn't go to school for coding. They went to school for music or literature or something like that. And there's something about the fine arts, right, that translates to writing code. And so, like I said, some of the best people that I ever worked with didn't have tech backgrounds. And I was like, okay, how can we put something in place where people aren't going to have to kill themselves and put 100-hour weeks in to be successful in it? I still think it's important to, I always say now, I'm like, part of getting good at doing something is feeling some pain, right? You don't learn from your victories, you learn from your failures and how to improve upon that, right? So, a little bit of pain is good, but it shouldn't be the kind of pain where you just forego sleep for like 3 days to do it, right? So, yeah, that was one of the central ideas when we built the company. And the other one was to kind of piggyback on that. It was, yeah, hey, we got a ton of super talented people here locally in our communities where companies could be leveraging that. And instead, in a lot of cases, they're sending the work offshore, right? And we're like, hey, if we've got people that have an interest in tech and have a strong work ethic, let's figure out a way to make it accessible for companies to give these people a shot, right? To come in and be successful before they farm out all the work to it. So those were the big things. And yeah, I do think, like, looking back, it was definitely not a traditional approach to doing it, but we've been very successful with it. We've done projects from what I would say data is our sweet spot. Data, yeah, we do tons of stuff with AI, but we've done DevOps, InfoSec, app dev, mobile apps, every kind of data and cloud migration that you can think of. But we brought people in that were musicians and truck drivers and teachers and welders and everything else that you can think of. People coming into this, the shared trait was they had a identifiable interest in technology and they had a strong work ethic. And then we can pair them up with senior subject matter experts and make them successful and get them up to speed with it. So yeah, it's been fun. And it evolves too, right? Like it's one of those things where if you do it like this, like you can't just say, well, this is the way we do it. And you either have to fit this mold or go do something else, right? Like we have to evolve with it. So the way the model is today, it's going to be different tomorrow. It's going to be different next year, and it's just going to keep evolving also. So that's in a nutshell. That's kind of how we started, and that's what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome, Casey. It's always great to hear stories of connecting people with opportunities, people who want to work hard and put in the time to be successful, and then connecting them to the right kind of opportunities to make a difference. Related to the story of Techletics, how did it come to be, and what kind of gaps were you looking to fill?
Yeah. So actually, my partner is a guy named Dan Jones. Dan played football at Arizona State. Right. And he had a coach there. His name was Frank Cush. And if you don't know anything about Frank Cush, right, his name's on the stadium at ASU. And he was it's interesting. A lot of, I talked about how our background came in. A lot of what Frank did was he was able to find talent that other people didn't necessarily see, and he was able to develop that talent and be successful with it, and had an emphasis on work ethic, right? Doing the small things and putting in the work to be successful. Which, like, hey, that's what it makes everybody successful, right? But Dan and Frank were having lunch one day, and something along the lines, Frank said, "Hey, when are we going to do something to get our former football players into IT, right? If they're not going to make it pro, we got to have some kind of option for our players." And Dan called me up. I was working in healthcare out of Denver at the time, and he said, "Hey, I need you to come down here to Phoenix and help put a program together where we can turn football players into coders." Right. And that's how we got started. Right. That's how we got the name Techletics. Right. Is our first partnership was with Arizona State's athletic department. And it wasn't just football players, it was soccer players and wrestlers and volleyball players, and you name it, right? Anything we could bring in. But yeah, it's funny looking back now because I didn't know how it was going to work, right? I was like, okay, you know, hey, I've been able to put a ton of work, right? And kind of get myself on the path to hopefully be successful here. Are there going to be a bunch of Division I football players that are going to want to go that same route? right? I didn't know. And what it turns out is there's a lot of athletes, not just football players, but athletes that end up being phenomenal developers, right? Because they've got certain intangibles that we as people don't always have, right? But Division 1 high level athletes, right? Number one, have an extremely strong work ethic to get themselves to a level where they can compete at that level, right? And they also have however many years of incredible teamwork experience coming in. So, you guys are both in the IT space. Once upon a time, you would see developers out there and they had a little cubicle and they had the walls shut off on it and they kind of sat in there and they'd go for 8 hours and crank out work. It's not like that anymore, right? It's a very collaborative environment. It's a very collaborative workspace, and you're tied into business users and customers and everything else constantly. You're doing scrum meetings and sprint retrospectives and everything else. So being able to work as a team and self-motivate and have strong work ethic are huge legs up that not everybody has coming in, even if they have an interest in tech. So, the athlete angle made a lot of sense coming in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Someone I used to work for a few years ago would always say, in tech and whether it's product management or coding or design, like he liked to hire people who had played on sports teams when they were growing up, because it is a lot about teamwork.
Yeah. Veterans too, right? We've hired lots of veterans over the years, and same principle, right? A emphasis on teamwork and work ethic and making sure that you're doing the small things correctly at all the time, right? Those are things that, those two kinds of programs in particular are extremely strong at reinforcing those characteristics in somebody. So yeah, I love it when I have a veteran that comes along that wants to get into tech too.
Absolutely. I mean, super team oriented individuals who tend to be fairly good and like extremely intelligent. So they also have a pretty good education and in a lot of subjects that makes them really easy to work with. I did my undergrad at MSU Denver, which has a really good computer information systems program. I saw GI Bill veterans going to that school specifically for that program, and they were some of the best people to work with on things like group projects because they understood the idea of like everybody needs to come together and work on those things, which really just is indicative of how well they work with everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not going to go away either, right? Like, I mean, especially with, it's hard to tell where the industry and the world and technology and everything's moves in the future, but there's no reason to think, in my opinion, right, that we're going to move into any more of an isolated way of doing work or building out technology. If anything, we're just going to get even more interconnected things. So people with backgrounds like that, I think they'll continue to put themselves in a position for a lot of success.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And I think that that's actually a really good segue to my next question, which is what are the major trends that you're seeing right now in tech and workforce development? And what are you doing in Techletics to kind of meet those challenges?
Probably nothing AI, right? You guys heard anything in the news about AI? Yeah, I guarantee you, if I pick up my phone and I pull up like Google News or something like that, like on the first page, there's some kind of brand new article on AI adoption or AI taking over the world or whatever it is, right? Or displacing jobs, whatever. But yeah, I mean, like anybody else, I I think we're going to see increased adoption. I think we're going to see an increased rate of adoption by companies and individuals getting into the AI space. I look back and I can remember I was a kid, right? But I can remember when I got my first 6K modem, right? And what a difference it was to be able to sit there and use a computer with the internet and without the internet, and how big of a change, this feels like that, maybe more, right? It feels kind of more, and maybe it's just because I've lived this much of my life without AI agents and LLMs and everything else being able to supplement and augment some of the stuff I do. But I would expect, and you're seeing it now, right? You're starting to see industry adoption, different industries adopting different roles. I always tell people, for the past year and a half, I'd say I would see different existing customers, new customers that would be reaching out and saying, "Hey, do you think it's possible? I've got this weird idea to do something. Do you think it's possible to use AI to do it?" And it would be like, "Yeah, I think so. Let's proof it out. Let's do a proof of concept to see if it works." And we would do it, and then we'd get back on a call and we'd say, "Yep, there it is." And they'd say, "Okay, that's super cool." Then they'd go and do whatever with it, and they'd have a conversation with their board or something, and they'd all look at it and say, "Okay, cool." But then that was kind of it, right? Because they were just kind of wrapping their heads around what's possible, what the capabilities are. And now the conversations that I'm running into are, it's those same people that are coming back and they're like, "Hey, you remember when we talked about if we could do something like that? Okay, let's do it. Like this is how we want to harden it, and this is how many users we expect to be in this thing. Let's do the implementation." So we're seeing a ton of implementations right now. Across there's some text-based stuff, but also like the newer stuff like audio and video and image integration. Yeah, I think that's going to continue on, and I think you know I was seeing this quote the other day. It was Mark Cuban talking about it, and he said there's two kinds of companies in the future, right? There's AI companies and there's the companies they put out of business, right? So I don't know, like if it's that drastic. I don't know. I I do think it's a competitive advantage, right? And it doesn't hurt to kind of dip your toes in the water now and start seeing what it looks like for your company. But I would expect every company in the future is going to have to get more involved there. They're going to have AI agents. They're going to have people that are working with AI agents, and we'll just continue to see adoption.
100%. I mean, the Google CEO has compared AI to the rise of electricity, which is arguably more or less, we can compare the internet and the transistor and all these different technologies, but the electricity comparison is interesting because every company does use electricity. And so the Mark Cuban quote would apply very well to pre-electric or the rise of electric companies. And I do think that AI will have a similar effect on companies between AI and robotics using AI and all of the different permutations of how AI can affect hardware and software. We're looking at billions of humanoid robots functioning with AI in the next 10 to 30 years. It's just really crazy to think of how much that will transform the world in really positive ways, but also the labor disruptions could be pretty significant along the way.
Where else is it going to be? Labor disruptions, right? But also, like, what are the use cases now? I always say, like, there's two things. There's what are we doing now that we can augment and make something better, right? That we're doing just because that a machine's going to be better at. But what are the things that like we don't do right now? Because we don't have the capability or scale, and it's going to be really easy for a machine to do. Like you talked about robotics, right? So I do these little videos every once in a while. And I put them on my YouTube or not my YouTube, but my LinkedIn. I guess I put them on YouTube too. But I've got, you can't see it, but up there, I've got this little 3D printed robot arm that my kid and I made once upon a time, and it was made to just have like you press the buttons on it, it moves forward and turns like this, it opens its claw, right? And I was like, okay, how hard is this to like change the interface on it to use basically like a chat GPT interface instead? And it was easy. It was like 15 minutes worth of code probably. So, and I named it Terminator, right? So I'm like, hey, Terminator, like go all the way to the right and open your claw and grab this thing and then go over here and do something. But I mean, it was next to no effort at all to be able to build something out with that. So, hey, can we apply to things that we already have and then, make it easier to interface, make it easier for people to interface and program and things like that. And then you think about, like you said, you're going to have all these robots running around. We did another AI project where we essentially, the goal was, can we go on social media and influence public opinion, right? With a bot, right? And it totally worked, right? We were able to build this thing out that could go and it could interact with posts and try to sway opinion from these posts. It totally worked. And then like we were talking about that, and somebody brought it up and said, yeah, like could you have these bots in like shopping centers to kind of like steer people in the direction of your store, or to show congregation in certain areas? And you totally could, TJ, like to what you're talking about right there. Like, why couldn't you have, Gap has 10 shopping bots that are out there, like kind of going to competitive areas of the mall and saying, hey, there's a really good, hey, I see you're looking at this, but there's a really good deal over here at Gap right now. And that's one of those things where you couldn't do that today. I mean, I guess you could, but think about the cost to do something like that. Think about the cost reduction. But it's scary and it's awesome at the same time where we're going to come out on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. You watch sci-fi movies, and they either look like really hopeful or like real dark and dystopian. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of middle ground. But I hope that reality kind of threads towards the middle ground, or at least like real happy.
It's going to be, there probably will, right? It's going to be one of those, it's a bell curve kind of deal where you're going to have a lot of use cases that are in the general well-being, and you're going to have some that are just fantastic, and then you're going to have some that aren't fantastic. I would expect that we'll probably see a little bit of everything. A little bit of everything. It'll be on us on, how we can adapt and how we can control and, just get by, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy seeing how different places around the world are adopting it and technology. Like they use the facial recognition and AI in China for like social standing, social currency is an interesting place that's going. But it's again just an interesting way in seeing that different places are using this technology. It's focusing back on Techletics. What do you feel is working really well for your growth right now? What challenges do you feel like you're running into?
I think our model, right? Again, our model is built to provide a local, U.S. based resource at an offshore competitive price, right? That's what our bread and butter is. That's what we try to build out. And we do everything, right? Like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years now. I take on subject matter expert roles with certain customers that we do projects with. So we've got anywhere from 20 some odd years of experience all the way to brand new people coming in, right? But our model is being able to provide talent at a globally competitive price, but right wherever you're at, right? And we've kind of created that out, and we've been doing it successfully for a long time. We did a lot of R&D on that in the early days, making sure that we could apply it to different industries and types of technology. But we're through that now. We're kind of scaling it out, and we're seeing a lot of success with that. Like I said, I think it's because we took it really slow early on to make sure that we had a lot of questions answered. But we're seeing a lot of success with that. I would expect that there's going to be more of a push for that, especially now that we've got certain tech and tools out there that help people get up to speed more quickly. I think we're like, obviously I'm not afraid to jump into that area, right? Like I'll definitely be one of the ones that jumps in and says, yeah, we got to arm our people with whatever tools are out there to be successful. But that's a challenge, like staying current with everything that's out there, especially with how quick tech is transforming. Like I said, you can go on multiple times a day to whatever your choice of news is, and I guarantee you'll see a new AI article that's out there, some kind of new application for technology that's out there. So the challenge is, how do you continue to stay current with all of that, to put it out to the workforce, make sure they're successful with that. So that's one of the things that we're always doing. We're trying to keep our customers on the front end of that, right? Making sure that, maybe we feel some of that pain so they don't have to. But I do think we'll continue to see that. And I think we'll continue to see opportunity for people with more of those non-traditional tech backgrounds to get into more of a tech role because of ease of access to knowledge and getting up to speed with any kind of coding or whatever kind of tech it is by utilizing AI. And again, I think Techletics, we're definitely well positioned for that because we've been working towards that for a long time.
Nice. Yeah, 100%. And the model does seem really sound. You've talked a lot about how nimble you are as things evolve over time. And then you're also bringing in really great people coming from a variety of backgrounds, but with high work ethic and a lot of motivation to succeed. Question on, with the market right now with tech and software, especially being ebbing and swaying a lot in the last, 2 to 4 years. There's a lot of growth during the pandemic. And then the market seems to have softened in the last couple of years. What's working for you all in terms of growth? Is it like word of mouth, referrals? Is it networking at conferences or cold outreach? Is anything especially successful for you at this point?
Everything. That's I don't know. That's the thing. Like anybody else, right? We'll do outreach. We'll do outbound, right? And you try to put a campaign together that's going to be successful, talking to somebody, and you can get stuck in that area where you want to overanalyze it. And you're like, if I send it uh, at 8 p.m. on 8 p.m. Or 8 a.m. in the morning on Tuesday, right? I'm going to be able to get the right people. But if I go at 6 a.m. or if I go on Monday, I'm not going to get it. So you'll send that, but then you run a parallel one at the same time. Guess what? You're getting somebody on Monday morning. It's like the universe is saying, "Hey, don't get too wild on you." So I think it's honestly, I think you just have to do as much as you can, right? Like, I think conferences are important. I think word of mouth, obviously, word of mouth is extremely important, right? Taking care of your customers, taking care of your partners, maintaining good relationships with everybody that you can. But yeah, you have to do everything else that goes along with it. And especially with this environment, right? Especially with today, because, to go back, coming back on AI, but AI has made it so much easier for some of these industries to ramp up and scale, right? Where, it's easy to do outbound SDR. It's easy to do it, right? There's AI tools that do it for you now too. There was once upon a time where that was probably enough. It's not enough, right? You have to kind of be going at everything you can um, to be successful with it. So yeah, I think what pandemic, right? Pandemic was a weird one because I can still remember when I got the call. I was talking with my partner, and I said, "Hey, I got to go tell the team we're shutting the office down." And he said, "Well, hold on. I don't, I don't know if we're going to get there yet." And I said, "No, no. Like, I just got a note from somebody that at so and so time today they're shutting the whole office building down. We have to get our office cleared out." And I went and talked to the team because, like I said, you guys were juniors, right? Once upon a time, did you guys start off remotely as juniors? Nope.
No, not at all.
Isn't that terrifying to think about that as being totally remote, never working in this environment? But guess what? Like, we're 5 years in. The people that started 5 years ago, that's how they started. That's how they started. So it's not terrifying to them. It's normal. But I can remember going in and having that conversation and being like, listen, when you wake up tomorrow and we go to work, it's the same work as it was today. That office is the same as this office, right? Like, you're in the office and we're going to be successful because we're going to stay close. We're going to do this together. So, and like I said, I mean, my point of bringing that story up is something's always changing, and something's always changing in the market, the economy, technology, whatever it is. The point is you kind of always have to have your head up, have your eyes open, looking to see what's going on and utilizing everything that you can to hopefully stay successful in what you're doing. And that's what we always keep doing, trying to at least.
Yep, that totally makes sense. Kind of going back to AI, are there any tools or trends that you're like really excited about right now, or conversely, anything that you kind of look at with a fair amount of skepticism?
I try not to get too caught up in the semantics, right? Like, I think, and I get it why. Like, hey, I read the same articles that everybody else reads, and whoever's trying to put an article out there, they're trying to do something within like a couple of words that are going to lock your attention to like, I need to click and read this, right? And it's going to say something different or something wild or whatever, right? So I try not to get too caught up in the semantics, like I said, and understand like some of the underlying components of what's being talked about. But I see, the one I always see recently is like vibe coding, right? Yeah, hey, vibe coding is the way to do this, or oh, you don't want to vibe code, right? Because you're gonna lose the fundamentals. Listen, AI is another tool for the tool belt, just like the internet is a tool. Google is a tool for the tool belt, right? I'm probably, if I want to be super strict and I want to learn Java, right? What do you think the traditional way of learning Java is, right? Without the internet, it's to get a manual and start sitting there writing code and learning the manual and going through these courses and whatever else. I can do that, right? Or I can go to Google and I can try to find some stuff for my specific use case and be a human being and reason things out, right? AI is the same way, right? So, I think, you got to leverage the tools that are in the tool belt and don't get too caught up in whether somebody wants to apply a name to it and say, you don't want to do this or that or whatever. I also think the same with they say like LLMs versus AI agents. Oh, don't worry about LLMs anymore because now people are talking about AI agents. Listen, these things are just going to continue to build on one another. Some other company is going to get involved with it and they're going to have a new name for it that's super cool and it sounds better than an AI agent. We're going to start talking about that. And you don't want to use AI agents anymore. But the reality is again, like learn things from a conceptual perspective. It don't get too caught up in the semantics, but go out there and figure some of this stuff out. Go out and be inquisitive and try to understand how these things work and try to read between the lines, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a lot like there's good analogies of, when the calculator came out, could you use it in school? Like, well, you need to learn arithmetic, but at the same time, the classes ended up evolving and becoming more difficult, more conceptual math at a higher level sooner because people were able to use calculators. And
You're not
like,
always going to have a calculator in your hand, right?
exactly.
Not always going to have one.
But now we all have one in our phone and on our every device. We have 10 calculators in one household at least, depending on.
Voice activated. You know what I mean?
Yes, 100%.
Picture like the Chat GPT prompts where you can just sit there and take a picture. I totally did it with my kid. Or he
Yeah,
brought his math homework home, and I took a picture of the math homework, and I'm like, okay, tell me the answer, and it goes through and it breaks it all down.
that's amazing. It's like, are you cheating? Well, if your company is doing it twice as fast. And I think from a product perspective, vibe coding, however you want to implement the tech, is it losing critical thinking of the developers using it? That we need to be careful and watch out for any kind of skill gaps. But as long as the tech is working to spec, is it performant? Is it meeting the user specifications and all the requirements? Then that's ultimately what matters. So it'll be interesting to see how things evolve, even in the next few months. Speaking of the future, though, in the next 6 to 12 months, where would you like to see Techletics be, especially in terms of like growth and new customers, new business?
Like I said, we are in the past this year, right, like the 2025. I have seen a noticeable shift in the types of requests that we have coming in, and it's gone from proof of concepts to full-blown production implementations. And we've had a lot of success already doing full-blown production implementations of AI use cases to either augment existing processes or replace existing processes with AI. So had a lot of success with that, having a ton of fun with it. And what's funny is the developers, right? Like we do everything. I said this before, but we do everything across the board, right? We've got DevOps and DevSecOps and InfoSec and data engineering and legacy code, right? So we just started off. We've got a team of people that are getting up to speed, and 45 days in, right, they're putting production code into, it's not called an AS400 anymore, but everybody knows it as an AS400. But I've got RPG developers out there that are working on an IBMI that are putting code in production. And it's because, just like the bleeding edge stuff, there's a ton of systems that are built on this old bulletproof architecture, right? That still they run all the critical infrastructure in the country, right? So we still have to have people that are working on that stuff. What's funny is like you'll get people in and they see the shiny object over there with AI and they're like, well, hey, yeah, this is cool, but I wish I could do something with that. So what I would like to see happen, what I want to see, what I think will continue happening is I think we'll continue doing more on the AI side. We'll continue scaling out, and building out new teams and better teams and helping companies build new talent, right? Where I want to go, and we're definitely making a push in that direction, is I want to start blending more of the legacy tech with the bleeding edge tech that we have out there. I think there's a big opportunity for that. So we're working on that piece too. Yeah, you
Nice.
guys ever do anything with the mainframe or IBMI or anything like that?
I don't.
Green screen? Like you ever work on a green screen?
No, legacy tech in my realm is like PHP.
Oh, yeah. That's hey, in certain quarters, man, that's the modern stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, like the green screens, right? If you ever see like go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot, probably not Home Depot, but if you go to Lowe's and go in the back and tell them to look up a part for you, and they're going to pull up sometimes it's green, sometimes it's a different color, but they're going to pull it up and they're going to rattle off like 10 or 15 different keys on the keyboard, and it's going to roll through all these different screens. But there's a ton of, finance, right? The global financial system is built on code like that. Casinos, healthcare, you name it. It's all built on critical infrastructure.
It's actually kind of scary how much of our like infrastructure that we rely on a day to day basis is based off of tech from like the 80s that
In the
has
80s.
not been updated.
In the 80s. So I don't want to get off on a tangent on this, but I do think it's cool. There's a site out there called pub400.com, right? Where so in IBM it's this I series architecture from IBM, and it's super expensive, right? But the people think of it, it's like it's sold as a data center in a box. It's got, everything that you need to have in your data center, but it's in this one machine. And it's super powerful hardware, and it's a very powerful platform, but it makes it pretty much impossible for you or me to put one of these up in our data center. I've got a lot of computers sitting here beside me with GPUs and everything in it. I can't do that with a power 10 or something like that, right? So yeah, I think like I said, long story short is it's difficult to get into that kind of world on stuff, but I think there's value in being able to bridge the gap on. But Pub 400, right? There's a place where you can go out there. They've got a public facing series, right? Where you can do stuff on it. And I did a video, I think I put it on YouTube at one point, but the video is, how can I build a code crawler on this old architecture and have it crawl through and document all this old undocumented code and then stick it in Confluence or something where I can do something with it. And I had it crawl through and not really know what it was going to do. And it did. It found like a Tetris application that was built on this system. And it was written in like 92 or something like that. And no documentation. It documented the code out. It figured out what the different areas of the code were and everything. So, yeah, I think, like I said, blending the technology is going to be a big one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's an interesting take of, like old dated software that might be still in use in a lot of cases, and then adding a new modern cutting edge flair to it can really make a big difference. A lot of really interesting opportunities. I was once reading a book by some technologists, economics professors out of MIT, and one of the things they were talking about, they refer to themselves as tech optimists. They really believe in tech and in increasing the quality of life and the ability of us to continue to do so. They were saying even if you cut off raw research 100% today and didn't make any new technology, just with the existing technology that's laying around, there's still miraculous things that we can do with it. Combining old technologies and technology that might just be 6 months or a year old. It's just laying out there. And one example they gave was Uber. It took a smartphone, GPS, and that was pretty much it. Applications on a smartphone, and some of the technology that all relies on is not really cutting edge. When Uber was founded, they were just recombining it in a new way, and that's the case with a lot of applications. So yeah, I'm optimistic about the future. One thing we like to do to wrap up the show is talk about inspiration and what inspires you. So Casey, is there like a movie or a podcast or a book or a person that you've encountered recently that really inspires you?
Man, everything. I try to be rounded. I try to be pretty well rounded in this. And uh, hey, not everything's like this super new use case, or maybe it's not. We don't have to invent new tech for how to do this. You guys watch baseball?
A little bit.
Have you seen anything this year where they're talking about the torpedo bat?
I did see, yeah, it's
Yeah. So long story short, right? The torpedo bat is the Yankees came out this year and started cranking out home runs left and right. And everybody's like, what's going on? Like, hey, they've got some home run hitters on their team, but what's really going on? Well, you made me think of it because you said MIT, but the person that came up with it on their team was an engineer from MIT. And I think it was MIT. but they decided, hey, the shape of the bat should change, right? The shape of the wood should change. And it's going to drive more home runs, more hits. And their theory was, baseball bat gets longer towards the end of the bat, right? He said, what we're going to do is we're going to move more of the mass down towards the sweet spot of the bat and then make the top of it a little thinner. So it doesn't weigh anymore, but the center of mass is lower. So they're going to be able to swing it faster, and there's going to be more surface area where people normally hit the ball, right? He was like, the theory is it's fractions of an inch that are driving, strikes to hits and hits to home runs and everything else. And that's going to translate into win. The point there, right, is, hey, they didn't invent some new polymer or some new technology that's helping batters hit faster. They moved wood from one piece of a bat to the other. Right? It's driving this improvement in the way that the performance is on the field. So, rolling that into what you said, like, what are my inspirations? I'm a big believer in, there's a thing called the Medici Effect, right? So have you guys ever heard of the Medici Effect?
But I forget what it is.
The Medicis were an influential family in Italy years where essentially every year they would have an event where they would bring in the top artists from different parts of the world, right? And they'd have this kind of congregation. People would show off what they've been working on. They'd have philosophers come in and talk about these ideas. And the point was by having all these different people with expertise and ideas in different things, right? That everybody there was going to get better as a result of it. And I'm a big believer in that you bring people in with different backgrounds, cultures, and ideas, and different skill sets and everything. And you get better as a team as a result of that. So you ask me where I look at for inspiration. I look for people figuring out torpedo bats for inspiration, right? Where are the people that are outside of my normal 9 to 5 that are doing things to get better, and is there a way for me to apply them?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great. There's a lot of research on diverse teams being more successful. So pulling in that kind of different ways of thinking and diversity, and you hit it out of the park. No pun intended. Anyway,
No pun absolutely intended.
Casey, where can people find out more about Techletics?
Techletics.com. Definitely go to techletics.com. We've got some cool stuff up there. I've got a blog that I do not keep as active as I should, but I'm working on it, right? Send me a request on LinkedIn. I post stuff there all the time on just things that I think are cool. Like I said, I did a robot arm. I did one with I've got a 9-year-old now, and he's into tech, which makes it really easy, right? Because I can be like, I can go to my wife and be like, hey, we should go buy this robot car with a camera because Ronan's going to love it, right? And then we put it together and he goes to school and I sit there and play with his robot car, right? But I always post stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, send me something on LinkedIn, go to the website, fill out the form. Let's have a discussion on it. But yeah, I'd love to talk to anybody that's got some interest here.
Thanks a lot, Casey.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.